All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back. This is the Hear the Unheard Digital Summit. This is your host, Austin Turner. I have a pretty special guest with me today, Mr. Gino Mingo. I will allow him to introduce himself here in a second, but he's going to be talking about a very unique perspective to this COVID-19 conversation, and that is the spirituality perspective. Gino, welcome to the conversation. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Austin. Thank you.
All right, so first and foremost, for our viewers, who's Gino Mingo? Where are you located?
Oh, man. Gino Mingo, as you said. I'm a pastor here in San Diego, California. I am located in Scripps Ranch, California. Lovely community that we've been here for about 15 years now. And I am the pastor of a church, a small church called Roar. Like the lion, Roar.
Nice. Roar SD. I'll definitely tag it in the show notes for those viewers who are interested in learning more about Roar SD. But let's talk a little bit about, what Roar SD is, who do you serve? Is it specifically to the Scripps community? And what are you doing right now in regards to church accessibility?
Right now, there really isn't much accessibility other than, technology, Zoom, Facebook, IG, posting messages online, just trying to stay connected with the people, things of that nature. Obviously we're not gathering.
Sure.
So it's, just trying to keep things moving in the right direction without people feeling disconnected.
I hear that loud and clear. Very easy to do. And it's, really interesting part of this, overall discussion here that we're having with the Hear the Unheard Summit. A lot of my expert interviewees are talking about the mental side, talking about the rise in suicides and child abuse and all these other facilitating aspects to COVID-19 outside of the actual disease or the virus itself. Before we start addressing how you're communicating, what you're doing to serve the population, I'm from Mira Mesa, very familiar with the Scripps Ranch area. So first and foremost, thank you for what you've done as far as opening up your doors and still continuing to, serve your congregation. That's really cool that you've adopted social media and these other tactics to actually be able to get into the households. So kudos to you on that. So let's talk a little bit about where you came from. And now I know your story. I know your background. I've got obviously some connections and ties to it with my football connection. But let's talk a little bit to the viewers about, where you've come from, starting from the very beginning. Who was your father? That's always a great place for me to start.
It is, huh? Well, I'm originally from Denver, Colorado. I was born and raised, and I was there because that's where my father and my mom met. And my dad, Gene Mingo, I'm actually Eugene Mingo Jr., but when they were having me, my mom at that time, mid-60s, had an infatuation with John F. Kennedy, and so she wanted to name me John David, but my dad said, no way, his name is Gino. He's going to be Eugene, but we'll call him Gino. So that's why the Gino Mingo stuck, and I sound Italian. But my dad was actually an original Denver Bronco. He was the first Black NFL field goal kicker. He was a AFL scoring champ 3, maybe 4 years. He played for about 11 years. I love it. The late, great Lamar Hunt, who had the Dallas Texans and then moved them to Kansas City, once later on in life made a public statement that my father helped save the AFL. So it was a very proud thing to hear about your dad, before they merged and became the NFL with 2 conferences. So he still has a number of records. He has one that'll never be broken. He's the only player in NFL history to score 6 different ways of 50 yards or more. So, yeah, I see you looking up in the air. You're trying to access, how did he do this? And so, yeah. So, he took a punt back for like 62 yards in the inaugural game against the then Boston Patriots that we now call the New England Patriots. He he held, if he doesn't still hold it, the longest run from scrimmage. He also played running back. He played a little DB. He played a little quarterback. He also had the longest run from scrimmage of like 80 yards. That might have been broken, I'm not sure, but he had that for a long time. He took a kickoff back for a touchdown. He threw for over 50 yards, a touchdown a couple times. He caught a touchdown for over 50 yards. And then, of course, being a field goal kicker, he kicked field goals over 50 yards. So that's something that we'll never see again. And I just was talking to him the other day, and he was telling me we were trading podcast stories because he just did one recently, because they're trying to get him in the Hall of Fame. You know, just growing up in that time, you know, there was a real high racial element to things, and sometimes you can fall through the cracks, which he did. And so they're trying to bring back that, which is really actually significant history in the NFL. So hopefully he will get in the Hall of Fame. That's where
Absolutely.
I come from.
And I hope we can help. Yeah, I hope we can help with that. We'd love to get behind that. That seems like from what you've said and from what I know of your father, he seems like the perfect person to be in the Hall. That's for darn sure. And it goes to show, I mean, you mentioned 6 different ways that he scored over 50 plus. And it is a testament, I guess, or the blueprint of what made you, you know, who you are today. Looking at your background, you know, you obviously played football as well. You went to Oregon State, played in the NFL, you played in the CFL, you became a recording artist, pastor, family man, now a writer, an author. So there's a whole lot to unpack there. Let's start with Oregon State. What was your time like there in Oregon State? You know, you played football. What was your experience on the football team there?
It was a good time. It's funny. I was originally on my way to Ohio State, and somehow things took a left turn. And I ended up going to Oregon State because of a gentleman who used to play with my dad with the Broncos. He was a wide receiver named Lionel Washington, and Lionel Taylor. And I ended up going to Oregon State, and you know, all in all, it was a great experience. I had a lot of success there. Made some All-American teams and All-Pac-10 teams and all West Coast teams and things of that nature. And a mixed bag of experiences because, you know, it was in the early 80s, and I did encounter some things that were of a racist nature that you had to deal with being in rural Oregon. But I wouldn't trade it for the world. You know, it makes you who you are, the experiences that you encounter, the people you meet. And so I'm proud to be a Beaver. Anything's better than a duck.
Very nice. Too funny. I almost went to Oregon State too. Coach Unger, he was a special teams coach way back 2008. I was at a camp in New Jersey, actually, of all places, at Rutgers University. And had a really good showing out there. I was a kicker, go figure. Talk about the similarities, the parallels of it. Yeah, it's too funny. Okay, so Oregon State, good experience, had a first taste of reality in regards to, you know, the football realm. Let's talk about your transition from college to the NFL. You were with the Chiefs for a bit. What was that like coming out of college, and then that eventual playing for the Chiefs organization?
That was cool. You don't know what to expect, you know, going from the collegiate ranks to the pro ranks. Back then, it was totally different now. I mean, their training camps now are like day spas compared to what we experienced. We'd have like 8 to 10 weeks of two-a-days and training camp, and it was hot in Missouri. But I had a really good time for the short time that I was there. I was actually a rookie with Christian Okoye, the Nigerian Nightmare. One claim to fame is before we got to camp, there was this rumor that no one could bring him down by themselves. So I had to dispel that rumor real quick. I remind him of it anytime we talk. And, you know, got a chance to play with some all pros like Albert Lewis and Deron Cherry and Art Still and Bill Moss. And, you know, this is ancient times. It's back in the 80s, you know. That's a long time ago, but it was a good experience. One of the highlights was we came in from practice one day, and we were having lunch before we had to go to our second of our two-a-days. And one of the assistant coaches, grad assistants, came up and said, "Hey, Mingo, Mr. Hunt wants to see you." At this time, Lamar Hunt was alive, and all the guys look at me like, "Oh man, what's going on? What'd you do?" And I'm like, "I don't know, I don't know." And I get up and I walk up to him, and he stuck his hand out to shake my hand and started talking about my father and how much he loved my dad and what he meant to the AFL. And you know, that was pretty special to me. You know, the owner comes, Lamar Hunt, you know, started AFL, all this great stuff, and he wanted to talk to me about my father. So that was a pretty special moment. It was crazy though. I, you know, remember playing against Warren Moon. I remember my rookie season. I mean, my rookie year when I went there, we actually played in the Hall of Fame game against the 49ers. So, you know, coming out of college, and next thing you know, you're on the field and you're chasing Steve Young, and you're watching John Taylor take a punt back for a touchdown while you're standing there, and you're up against Jerry Rice is running these perfect routes and looking like a machine, you know, and then all of a sudden the game's over, and we went and showered, and I just happened, as I was walking through the double doors to walk to the bus, I opened the door, and at the same time, from the locker room next to me, the door swings open and the crowd erupts. And so, you know, naturally you walk out and the crowd is just, and I look to my right and there's Joe Montana. And the next thing I know, I'm walking with Joe Montana. He looks at me, says, "Hey, what's up?" I go, "Hey, how you doing?" And I mean, it was the first time that I've been to, you know, concerts. You know, I know what it's like to have someone screaming your name in a stadium. But that was the first time I literally experienced rock stardom. I mean, it was crazy. I'd been to a Jackson 5 concert when I was in the 3rd grade. You know, it was like, it was like these people were going nuts for Joe Montana. And I just had the craziest thought while I'm walking with them while they're roaring, Austin. I almost slowed down and let him go ahead of me. And I almost started waving my hand like they were screaming for me. I didn't do it, but in my head, I did.
That would have been funny. That would have been funny. That would have been a classic.
Yeah. So, you know, those are some of the things that I experienced before I was released and went to play up in Canada with the BC Lions. So.
Yeah, that in itself could be a whole other conversation. I tried to play in the Canadian CFL league back when I was still playing, and the game is different. The fans are different. The field's different. The ball's different. Just about everything with the game is different. However, it is, you know, a really fun game. It's a very fun game to play. Yeah. You've mentioned one thing that was interesting. You mentioned Jackson 5. You mentioned you've been in front of very large crowds, and you've mentioned that you performed in front of very large crowds. Let's transition a little bit into your recording artist days. Once again, I know your history. So there's Earth, Wind, and Fire. There's LA Riots. There's a number of, very interesting points that you could mention during this thing. But how does all of this correlate into Gino Mingo, the recording artist?
That's funny. Well, God, man, my dad keeps popping up into this thing. You know, when I was a kid, before I even knew, I just loved singing. And so I remember my mom would buy me the Jackson 5 albums. And I would sit there with my headphones on and I would just kind of match Michael Jackson note for note. But then as we got older, his voice kept staying higher and mine became my voice. And but I just loved singing. I didn't really think I wasn't really thinking, wow, I was a good singer as much as I just loved singing. And I had a knack for mimicking voices and things of that nature. Then I found out later on that when my father was in high school, he actually started a pretty famous group back in that day they're called Ruby and the Romantics. He started a group called the Romantics, and then they later on added Ruby, and they had a real popular song out back then called Our Day Will Come and all these things. And so I didn't even know my dad was a singer per se, but he just says, "Oh, I'm good in the backgrounds." He goes, "You can front, man." But I just kept singing. I got to college, and even as a freshman, I would go and sing in nightclubs with a friend of mine. Don't tell anybody, but I would go and sing, and I would go and sing it back in the day when they had karaoke and Black Angus, and I'd go win contests. And so I always loved singing. The only things I really ever wanted to do was play football and sing. And another friend of mine that we played high school ball together, he is now the assistant head coach for the San Francisco 49ers. He went to the league too, went to the Rams, was on the team with Eric Dickerson back in those days. And his dad played for the Broncos as well. When I was in high school, we had 3 guys on the team whose fathers played for the Broncos. And his dad, because part of the Earth, Wind, and Fire group is from Denver, and the other part is from Chicago, and they connected. And so he knew them. And so he was my connection to Earth, Wind, and Fire. I'll never forget, in '92, I had been playing a couple years in Canada, was going to graduate school, felt like I was kind of suffocating in Oregon. And he had talked with me and had set up a meeting, a connection to go into the studio with Philip Bailey and Maurice White of Earth, Wind, and Fire. And so I was really excited about that. And then all of a sudden the riots struck and it burned down their studio. So I was told that we were going to postpone. But at that moment, I had moved down to LA, living with some family members. And this is really where things took a turn. And God started showing me that he was actually calling me into the ministry. And so that's when that detour happened. But singing has always been a part of my life. So instead of trying to be the next Luther Vandross, I started doing worship as well as just pastoring and things. So that's kind of that transition there.
That's an interesting transition. You go from obviously NFL athlete, CFL athlete, recording artist, and then you transitioned almost 180 to now the disciple of the Lord. You're full on, driven, and you've almost devoted the last 20 plus years, 25 years of your life
almost 30.
To this cause.
Yeah, almost 30.
Almost 30.
Yeah, I went to the ministry in '93. Yeah. So
wow.
I've
almost
been in ministry
30
since 19.
years.
Yeah, almost 30. Yeah, 27. Yeah, almost 30. Yeah. So.
Talking about someone who's been there, done that, seen it from all angles, I think that is a pretty good classification for you. So now let's pivot out of the recording artist and into the pastorship role 100%. And let's now focus a little bit on, topic number 2, which is, how COVID-19 impacted the church today. I know we touched on it a little bit, but let's dive in or peel that back, what that looks like. Now, I'm getting this from, obviously multiple different angles. The goal with here at the Unheard Summit is to reopen youth sports, tell different sides of the story, share different perspectives that allow, others, our viewers, to hear ways and solutions that our interviewees are providing to the community, both on the soccer, nutrition, spirituality for this conversation. So let's talk a little bit about how these state-mandated guidelines have impacted the church and what you're doing currently to actually serve your community.
Well, it's interesting. The impact for us, because we're a very small church, isn't as major as other pastors and friends of mine. I'll be on pastoral Zoom calls every couple weeks, and just we'll be talking through the effect that this has had on them. We'll talk through certain statistics of how trying to keep up with numbers of if people are checking in, if they're viewing something live, or if they're watching it recorded, and then you can't really tell, did they actually watch the whole thing? Did they just watch 5 minutes? There's been a major effect on how you can touch someone's life spiritually, for those who believe in God and want to walk with God and believe in the importance of gathering as the body of Christ. It affects people in every area. It affects people spiritually, in their spirit. It affects them in their soul. It affects them physically. People don't realize sometimes how not being around other people affects you physically. They don't understand what gets released, the endorphins, different things when you are with a group of people and you're enjoying one another and you're enjoying the activity that you're doing together. Think about when we go to the beach, Austin, and whether someone's playing volleyball or they're just hanging out, enjoying the sun, and they're doing things. It has a literal effect on you in a total sense. And so, but it all starts from the core of who you are. And at the core of who you are is your spirit being. And so it's affected. So now for me, what has that done? Well, that's opened other doors where I'm not able to maybe touch the congregation or the people that are a part of Roar, but it's opened things up for me in the community. So I've been on a few different podcasts. I've led different vigils. As you know, I'm also a soccer coach. So there was always that aspect of always being around these young kids and impacting their lives, not just from a sports sense, but also them in a spiritual sense and just as a person, the development of this person. And so for me, because it's relegated us to this certain form of how we can worship and how we can interact, I have really been trying to inculcate just the importance of process, of loving the process, of embracing the process. I use the example with them. When I was a little kid, I didn't grow up going, I just want to play in the Super Bowl. I just want to play in a game. No, I grew up saying, I want to be a football player. I had a father who was a pro football player. I grew up and I'm watching Lawrence Taylor sack people and Mike Singletary smack people upside the head, or I'm watching Earl Campbell run through somebody, and I'm watching Marcus Allen, or I'm watching Anthony Davis as a little kid and Archie Griffin. And I'm going, I want to be a football player. And so what I learned even as a little kid is I have to learn how to love this process. The process, the mundane practicing of football, or the mundane doing it over, the coach going, do it over again, just that same thing. And so I teach my kids, I teach people in the congregation, listen, training implies failure, but the more you train, the less you fail. Well, guess what? More so spiritually. If you're not training yourself, if you're not getting in the word daily, now that can be kind of hyperbolic, but you need to be in the word daily if you can. Who walks around eating one meal a week, waiting for that next 7 days to pass before they get another meal? No one does. You eat every day, 3-5 times a day. People eat. In the same way spiritually. What are you consuming? What are you consuming that's helping you spiritually and in your soulish realm, so that you're not beat up by despair and discouragement and fear just choking the life out of you, and the unknown and the uncertain, to where you're waking up every morning and you're going, oh, Lord, it's morning, instead of good morning, Lord. This different perspective of how we're approaching the day and how we're going to win the day, and understanding this ridiculous season, unfortunate season we're in. This too is going to pass. But what are you going to be like when it does? Are you going to be behind the 8 ball or in front of it? Are you going to be behind in the game, or are you going to be winning? And so these are the things where I go, okay, I can't really, and as a pastor, if you're really going to be like Jesus, it's about touching the people. It's about being able to touch them. It's about being able to do life with them. Well, it's not as easy doing life through, social media platforms as it is when you and I could gather and go grab some lunch at Five Guys or something, and build. And so, it's been hard spiritually. I've known some pastors that have quit, people that have just buckled because now they're thinking, man, our tithe is gone, or this is gone, or they're reading reports of people saying, well, I may not come back because they won't let us gather. We can't sing at church. Don't sing. I mean, all kind of crazy things that affect us. But, there's a movie I love, Mel Gibson movie called The Patriot. You remember that movie?
Absolutely. One of my favorites.
Well, one of my favorite lines is after his son gets killed and he takes his 2 young sons and they want to go rescue his oldest son. He's looking them in the eyes and they're scared and they're wondering, what are we going to do, Dad? And he looks at him, he says, remember what your mother said. Stay the course. And that's what I'm telling people. Look, stay the course. Don't let what's going on around you get you to jettison everything. Stay the course. And so that's what I'm really trying to do in the community, is get people to mentally get their minds right and stay the course, and just, don't focus on the waves, but focus on Jesus.
Love that. That's very, very powerful words there. And I hope everyone takes those words to heart. It's very difficult to be in a routine right now. Everyone's routine's kind of been tossed upside down. But the resiliency and the persistency that you put forth now, the effort, the energy that you put forth now while your routine is shattered is just going to make you so much stronger when you are able to regain that
Absolutely.
routine type of scenario. And that's what I took from that. And it's really powerful. The positivity message that you are promoting and that you're sharing, it is unity, it's solidarity, it's uniting. It is coming together as a people, as a society. And I feel like if more people focused on their home, if they focused on, instead of throwing stones from their glass house, focused on strengthening the soil that is beneath that house that is, they're resting upon, we would be in a completely different world. We would maybe not united, because I think there is so much division that is, stemmed from a lot of deeper issues than we have time even to discuss on this call today, on this chat today. But at the end of the day, you can only control what's right there in front of you. I mean, you have no say in outside world or what happens outside of your household. So, what you're talking about and what you're promoting is something that I tremendously respect. And thank you for being that, leading from the front and that shining light that more people need. It's really hard to quantify also the emotional toll. I know you touched on that primarily, the emotional toll that COVID-19, isolationism, the quarantine itself, not having the ability to physically connect, but still able to spiritually connect through the resources that you have. That's tremendous. There is something that we can quantify, right? Attendance, you can quantify prayer requests, donations, things like that. Those are my areas of expertise here at Two-Footed Solutions from a communication standpoint. So those are really what, interest me. Talk to me about your church or maybe those pastor calls. What does attendance look like? Is it dropping? I don't need specific numbers, but, are we seeing a big drop in attendance, whether it be Zoom calls or people, stop coming back to church participation events?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting. We just last Thursday talked about this. Now, the movement I'm a part of, I have Roar, but I'm a part of a larger movement called Every Nation Ministry, Every Nation Churches, worldwide movement. And as we were talking as pastors, as a movement, there wasn't tremendous drop off where they were able to, like you said, quantify certain things. But because we're a larger movement, you're also connected with other movements outside of yourself. We're also getting the numbers back where as a whole, there has been a drop off. And I think it's really hard for people, when this first happened, my wife coined this the pause. And I felt like the Lord spoke to me that he was hitting the reset button. But it was funny because as we were going through this, Austin, people would laugh at me. Because I refer to it as Groundhog's Day. Because, it was just Groundhog's Day, right? You know what I mean? It's over and over the same thing, which is different than just a process, but it was just Groundhog's Day. And that's worn on people. And I think we've seen in society how it's worn on people. And different manifestations of people being mad and upset because they can't go back to work and going to Capitol Hills and protesting and other things that have manifested. And so I've seen where I think for pastors, sometimes the scary thing is because you have different people in different places in their walk with God. You have some that are new believers. You have some who've been walking for 30 years. You have then the in between. So everybody may not be as mature as the other person. And so when you don't have the kind of access that you would normally have, the different weekly meetings, the different groups that were helping people get established and grounded in their walk, that's where things really suffer now. Because, and then now what happens is, how we are as human beings and just our nature, when we get comfortable with things, it's easy to slide out of, when things get stuck, it's easy to slide out of that. You stop working out and you do that for 3 weeks, man, it's easy to just slide out of that habit and routine of working out. And in the same way, people start to get disillusioned. They get discombobulated. They, all these different things. And if you don't have those anchors that you can rely on sometimes, people kind of get untethered. And that's what I think we're seeing is people have kind of gotten isolated. They get a little untethered. And so they're maybe not checking in as much. They're maybe not watching the services online as much. And so that is cause for pause. It is cause for concern as a pastor. But at the end of the day, my trust is in Jesus, and it's his body, and ultimately I'm going, all right, God, you know what's going on even when I don't. And I'm just going to trust that if we stay the course, when we come out of this, you know what, we'll be okay if we continue to do what it was we were supposed to be doing. See, I have friends, I know certain people, say like a Drew Brees or you name it, Gerald McCoy, these professional athletes that come here and work out at Fitness Quest 10, COVID hit, but they didn't stop doing what was going to continue to make them elite NFL football players. So that when they come out of this, they report in the camp right now, well, they're not going to walk in with a beer gut. They're not going to walk in, you know what I mean? Yeah. Not knowing how to do what they were doing. They stayed the course so that when they come out of this season, they'll be prepared. And it's more important spiritually, I believe. It's more important because your spirit is the core of who you are. That's the core. That's the root. When I go up to that gym, I love it. Todd Durkin, who owns Fitness Quest 10, we talk about when he first started training Drew Brees or LaDainian Tomlinson, another friend. And every good trainer worth his salt, you're a trainer. You train people. One of the first things you look for is to see what's their core like. What's the core like? And our core is our spirit. And if that's weak, then guess what? Our soul's going to be weak and our body's going to be weak. And so for me, it's so important to try to help people solidify their core so that no matter what's going on around them, they're not a thermometer, but they're a thermostat. That's what I train my 5 daughters. Listen, I'm not training you to be a thermometer where you can be like CNN and MSNBC and you can just report what's going on around you. Just, it's cold, it's hot. No. I'm training you to be a thermostat. If it's too hot, I want you to step in the situation and cool it off. If it's too cold, I want you to step in and warm it up. But I want you to be a thermostat and regulate this thing. I get around people that are fear mongers, I just start to regulate it. I'm called to be a thermostat. Oh, whoa. I'm gonna bring you a different perspective. Let's balance this thing. Let's get this thing balanced here. And that's what people need in this hour. And especially when they can't really connect in a way that they were before spiritually.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thermostat, not a thermometer. I love that. That's a brilliant way and a palatable way to actually understand or visualize what that is. You're not just checking the temperature, you're actually turning it up or turning it down based off of the scenario or the situation itself.
Right.
And one other thing that you mentioned was very interesting is that you're want to help, right? That's what you're planted here, at least in San Diego, to do, is to help, right? But you can only help those that want to help themselves. And that kind of goes back to the entire conversation and the entire kind of focus of our chat specifically is strengthening that core, right? You have to be open, you have to be willing, and you have to be accepting what type of help is required. However, you have to be willing to put the work in. If you're not going to put the work, if you're going to sit back and point fingers, if you're going to sit back and focus on the things that are out of your control, you're not going to come out of this strong. You mentioned Drew Brees, you mentioned your LT, you mentioned Gerald McCoy, if he's not playing, but you have people who are putting in the work, even in situations that aren't ideal. They have to wear a mask, if they're this, if they're that, whatever it may be. They're not making excuses to fall behind. They're doing whatever it takes in order to get the job done. Now, everyone's definition of success is different, right? Your definition of success is different than LT's, which would be different than Drew Brees. However, they are working every single day to achieve that definition of success. And that is the difference. And that is where, we want to focus ourselves and our resources at 2-Footed Solutions. And I'm sure you the same at Roar SD. Your doors are open. You want to help everyone and anyone for that matter. But the people that you do help are those that want to help themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you mentioned one thing that was very interesting, and that is the 5 daughters. And now when you mentioned you have 5 daughters, I chuckled, and I'm going to enjoy this portion of the conversation a lot, because one of your famous quotes for me was drowning in estrogen. Let's talk a little bit about what that means for you, specifically here during COVID-19.
Oh man, look, my wife and I, when we got married, we always wanted 5 or 6 kids. I just knew God would throw one in there with kibbles and bits. I was like, what's going on, man? Unfortunately, we had 3 miscarriages before we had our first daughter, but I'm blessed. Don't get me, I am so blessed. I love being a daddy's girl. I have my hashtag daddy's girl sweatshirt and shirt. But man, I live with 7 women. I have my wife, my 5 daughters, and my mother. So when I say I'm drowning in estrogen, it's no joke. I told people when COVID hit, man, I became the head RA of a female dormitory. It was just, and then you tack on the virtual learning and finding space and all of the electronics and all the Zoom calls that had to happen, and then dealing with being quarantined and having to be in the house. And so it was an amazing experience. It still is, but whew, I couldn't leave and go to the gym to get around any estrogen. I mean, to get around any testosterone. That was my one getaway. I could run up to the gym and I could sweat and get around some other men, get some testosterone. But I love it, man. My heart is full, and I'm surrounded by a gaggle of wonderful women.
Yeah, absolutely. You have a tremendous family. Obviously, we have a connection to the soccer arena. Tremendous family. Now that the girls aren't playing soccer, what are their lives like at home?
Well, that was the thing. I really had to practice what I preach, in having to try to get them to learn to love the process. When you're 15, 13, 12, 10, 9, that's my girls right there. To get them to be able to focus on the goal that's down the road when it's there is one thing, but to get them to be able to focus on the goal down the road when they can't see it is a whole nother ball game. And so I really just had to work at trying to keep them focused on the process, not to be discouraged, with the naysayers. We're not going to play. So I had to get out there, and I bought like street futsal balls, and I the good thing is I have 5, so I could do little 4v1 rondos. I mean, we're out in the street, and then we were training them, and they had to run and do sprints, and I was setting up the cones in the street, and then there was videos of working on their footwork. Here, let's learn this move. That's the 4-tab Ramos. Here's the McGeady. I mean, I had them just out there just doing stuff, going, listen, this is going to open up at some point, and then you got to be ready. But that doesn't, it's hard, because you know what? People gain that COVID-15, people are laying around, so it was, I would notice, like the freshman, I would notice, all of them are different. Everybody's personality is different, and so I know my girls well. I could tell when emotionally things were starting to weigh on one or another, because they're cooped up, or, and especially with my oldest, because they all have aspirations of going on to play on the women's national soccer team. But my oldest, she's in that season of now recruiting and wanting to get in the right place to be seen and to go to a certain college. So now for her, this was a big year. And so now all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Don't get to go to the showcase tournaments that I would normally play in, where I'm going to be seen in the summer. I don't get to do this. We're praying that, gosh, October's going to go. So just trying to keep her I'm going, wait, this is just a season. It's just a season. It's going to pass, just like winter passes into spring. We're going to be okay. But, it takes work to help keep their minds right, to help keep them locked in on the process of going, listen, love the process. So when we come out of this, you won't be behind like others might be because they weren't doing anything.
Love that. Love the process. Love the process. That's it. Fall in love with the process.
Yeah.
Okay, so talk to me. What's on the horizon, both for you, the church, soccer, anything that you want to touch on now? We'll get to the book here in a second. Definitely want to talk a little bit about that. But what's on the process for Roar SD?
You know, right now I'm being funny trying to read the tea leaves. Now just trying to figure out the wind, you know, the direction and discern what's going on. We're in a place where we're really flexible right now. So I'm really waiting to see how we come out of this. I don't think it's ending anytime really soon. So I'm really seeking God as to, okay, what steps do you, I'm realizing, you know what, don't shy away from the unconventional. You know, sometimes as human beings, we're too afraid to change. So I'm looking and going, okay, Lord, what changes are you making? Some things may, you know, you're used to doing so much a certain way that other things can look really unconventional, but then you could miss it if you're not open to it. So I'm just trying to stay open to what God might be doing as far as the church is concerned. For me, I'm just really trying to touch the community so that when things do open up, that may draw more people to us because they experienced us even outside of a church setting, which may make them even a little more comfortable now in a church setting because they relationally feel connected. So for me, like everything's about relationship. You know, I'm a real strong discipleship guy, and true discipleship is relational. And so we were created as relational beings. That's why when we see an ogre or we see a hermit, or we see it sometimes seems a little strange to people. You know, it's one thing to be an introvert. It's another thing to just isolate yourself totally. You know, people go, that's kind of weird. What's going on? You know, we're relational beings. And so for me, it's always about connecting. You know, it's always, that's why I love your father. You know, he and I, that's the level he and I connected on, was a relational thing. And it was based off of foundations that we found were in common. And, you know what I mean? And then we had daughters. And so it was just this thing. And from there, that relationship grew. And so, you know, it's never about being religious. I hate religiosity. I tell people all the time, Jesus didn't come here to bring you a religion. He came here to bring you a relationship. When you get that revelation, your world opens up. And so it's really relational. When I coach these little girls that I've been involved with for years, coaching these girls last week, you know, I was out there relationally connecting with them, not just on how to trap the ball correctly, but just how to flourish in their soul, how to flourish as a human being. So I'm hoping that when we come out of this, that roar increases. But I'm just ready for whatever it is that God wants to do.
Brilliant. Brilliant philosophy, brilliant outlook. And obviously, you know, all the best to you. I really want to see someone like you, somebody so positive, somebody so, you know, help first, focused so on the good, focused so on the positivity this world's got to offer. I want the best. How can people find you in the event that they need some assistance now, and you know they want to reach out and say, hey, you know, let's talk. How can you provide value to my life? What's the best way to go about that?
Well, they can email me at Gino at roarsd.org. It's also on the website. We're actually changing the address on there, so I got to take that down. But also I can be reached through IG, Instagram, Gino.Mingo, and also Facebook. Same thing, Gino Mingo, Facebook/Gino Mingo. And yeah, and I'm always available, constantly available.
I love that. Love that. And I'll definitely plug those in the show notes for sure. I'll definitely plug those down there so people who want to find you, they have all the different handles to be able to reach you at. Now, finally, before we get out of here, I'm probably most excited about this. And I'd say most, even though I was really excited about Gene, that conversation with Gene. However, I am excited about the upcoming book, Black Belt Discipleship. I want to hear about that. I want you to tell the viewers about that. I love the focus on the process, and I hope it's shared every single page of this book.
Oh gosh, thank you. Yeah, this is my heartbeat. right here. I got saved when I was around 12, 13 years old, in a little Southern Baptist church in Denver, Colorado. And I'll never forget, I got baptized. And then the way I describe it is that they strapped a parachute on my back, took me up, kicked me out the plane, and didn't tell me how it operated. So then I'm just floating along, and finally someone came by and ripped the cord. And his name was AC Green, the famous Los Angeles Lakers with Showtime, playing with Magic Johnson and all those guys. And it was then that I really got introduced to the concept of discipleship. Now, I understand that concept as an athlete through and through, because as athletes, you and I, we are always aware that we have a coach, we need a coach. Matter of fact, you and I both have played for people that coached us that couldn't beat us in our respective games. They weren't more talented than we were, but they knew how to coach us. They knew how to draw out of us and even impart into us what was needed. And the thing about us over here in America is we are so information driven. I'll walk off, give me the information, and all of a sudden I'll get the information and I think I know it, and I'll run off and I'll try to do it. But as soon as the rubber meets the road, I fail. Or what happened? Well, because what you really had was a head knowledge. But you and I don't live out of our head knowledge. We live out of our heart knowledge. Everything we live out of our hearts. And what needs to happen in our lives with everything is impartation. I didn't become a football player just because my dad bought me a helmet. I became a football player because day in and day out, 5 days a week, we practiced, and then we played on a Saturday, and we practiced and we trained and we trained. And I failed and I failed and I failed. But the more I trained, the less I failed. And in the same way, that's what Jesus did with his disciples. He didn't come here and just disseminate information. He came here and he imparted his life through relational connectivity. He imparted it. And so over here in America, we're informational driven. But if you were to go and you were walking in Israel in his day, that's not how it happened. You followed, they imparted, they showed you, they taught you, they showed you, they taught you, then they sent you out, you did it, they brought you back in, they corrected you. It's like being an apprentice. It's like learning how to be a carpenter, learning how to be a painter or whatever it is. There was just an aspect. And so for me, I just felt like God had gave me that title and that concept, black belt discipleship, imparting the nature of a disciple maker. He really dropped in my spirit just the parallel of a belt sash system in martial arts, and how you have the white belt to the black belt. And at each stage of that thing is you are growing into a more mature person in that discipline, in karate, in Wing Chun, and whatever. And in the same way, there are principles that God wants to impart into our lives that cause us to grow into that mature being, as the Bible talks about, growing up into the mature stature of Jesus Christ. So I always want to tell people, listen, the only thing that exceeds right doing is right being. And you cannot and will not be or produce something you are not, because it's simply not in your nature. And so I'm going, what this book is about is making this, being a disciple, second nature. Because if you become a disciple, then you won't fear trying to make disciples. It'll be something that naturally happens. When you stepped up to kick the ball, whether it was in soccer or football, you weren't thinking about every single step. You had done it so much that it became second nature to you, like brushing your teeth, putting on your clothes while you're thinking about the 3 meetings you have later on in the day and how you have to get to the dentist and have to pick the kids up. But the whole time I'm doing that, I'm putting my shirt on, I'm tying my shoes, I'm brushing my teeth, because it's second nature. And in the same way, God wanted our relationship with him to be something that was imparted into us, to when we respond to a COVID situation, or we respond to a racist situation, or we respond to a socioeconomic system, you and I can respond as a disciple, and it'll naturally flow out of us and actually help sustain the weary one. That's what it says in Isaiah 50. It says, he's given me the tongue of disciples so that I may sustain the weary one. Austin, when you and I look around here, There's so many weary ones. When I think about some of the kids on the soccer field that are coming out of bad situations and have been bottled up, maybe their parents are getting divorced, maybe their parents have substance abuse issues, maybe there's a lot of anger and things, and then all of a sudden they were cut off and they don't have that access to their teammates and their coach and that atmosphere that helps them spiritually, helps them in their soul, helps them physically. They're cut off. They need someone that has a word that can sustain them because they're weary. And that's everywhere. That's at your workplace. That's at this grocery store. That's on the soccer field. That's wherever you and I go. They need to be able to be sustained with the word of God so they can get through whatever situation, whatever circumstance, whatever COVID thing they're in. They can get through it with flying colors.
I love that. Talk about developing that foundation, creating those processes that regardless of the situation, you're going to have the tools in your tool belt to be able to overcome, adapt, and conform. I love that. That's beautiful. When is it available? Where can you get it? Talk about that good stuff.
So we are just now entering into the publishing process. So hopefully it'll be available on, obviously like Amazon, Kindle, all of those places. I'll be selling it off of my website. But we're shooting for the beginning of 2021 because they once, they'll go in, and then from the time that once the final edit is done, I was told that it takes about 12 to 16 weeks once it goes to print, and then you get it. So that really sets us probably around the beginning of the new year. So now I'm getting ready, going to try to pump it, get people prepared and ready for it, and do all the legwork there so that when it drops, hopefully it'll be something that can impact people's lives for the better. And they could see it as, like you said, the process. They'll see that. That's why the subtitle is imparting the nature of a disciple maker. Because the nature of who we only live out of our nature, who we are. And that's what I want people to really grasp, is that when you become something, then you'll produce what that thing is. And so that's what Jesus wanted. He said, I want you to go and make disciples of all the nations, all the ethnic groups, teaching them to observe, not casually inquire, but to actually observe, keep, hold to, don't let go of all the things I've taught you. And in that way, when we do that, we'll produce the things that actually can help someone's life change.
Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Gino, it has been a tremendous, tremendous pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for bestowing your wisdom, peeling back the curtain on the spiritual impact on COVID-19. Greatly, greatly appreciate it. You get a tremendous voice, very powerful figure. I hope that you pray nothing but the best for you, of course. Absolutely.
Oh, thank you so much. That's humbling. Thank you.
Pleasure. All right, guys, this is Austin and Gino signing off here at the Unheard Digital Summit.
All right. See you on the flip.
All right, everybody. That was Gino Mingo, expert interview on the Hear the Unheard Digital Summit. Fantastic chat talking about spirituality, the impact it's having on COVID-19, what he's doing with Roar San Diego, and how he is impacting the local community. Definitely look forward to our next conversation. Tune in. Have a great day.